I'm ready to have a productive discussion. I've got to go to another committee. Maybe you'll have it today. I haven't heard it.
Yes, sir.
What I've heard is the implication is that anybody who is against asking hard questions about the overhead and spending is against biomedical research.
I wouldn't say that, sir. I think you are a champion.
And I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I don't either.
But every penny that we spend on overhead that's not being audited, and you know as much as I do, Doc, that some of it is being abused, is money that is taken away from research. And that's just a fact. And if you care about this child here, and I know you do, we all do, then any money spent illegitimately on overhead to pay the salary of a professor in the humanities department at a university is coming out of her research. And it's not wrong to ask questions.
It is not wrong to ask questions.
No, it's not.
Not at all. And Senator, I think it's actually important to ask those questions and optimize the system.
And I don't understand why these universities cannot live on 15% overhead when Gates Foundation limits them to 10% and the Johnson Foundation limits them to 12%. Let me ask you about one of the worst abuses I've ever seen. It was at Stanford.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Stanford
was spending 74% of grants from NIH on overhead. Remember that?
I do, although I was in high school at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't. and they audited Stanford.
Yes, sir.
You remember what they found?
They bought a sailboat.
They found that Stanford was spending some of that money to pay the salaries of the employees at a Stanford-owned shopping center, didn't they?
Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're ready to dive deep into one of the most outrageous things I've seen in a long time: government spending, taxpayer dollars, and the wasteful, bloated bureaucracy we're stuck dealing with. Today, we're talking about a recent clip featuring Senator John Kennedy questioning Dr. Parrick on the absurdity of university overhead spending, especially when it comes to NIH research grants. And let me tell you, this one hit a nerve. Big time. You hear that, folks? Senator Kennedy is hitting the nail on the head here. He's calling out these universities and their outrageous overhead costs. For those of you who don't know, overhead is essentially the administrative costs associated with handling research grants. And these universities? Well, they're taking your taxpayer dollars, and instead of using them for actual research to better the country, they're throwing it into their bloated bureaucracies and lavish administration expenses. Now let's break this down for a second. We all know that biomedical research is essential. No one's against finding cures for diseases or improving healthcare, right? But here's the thing. Why is so much of the money, the taxpayers' money, getting swallowed up by administrative costs instead of going where it's supposed to go? Right into the lab, into the hands of those hardworking researchers who are busting their tails to make breakthroughs that actually help the American people. And that's exactly what Senator Kennedy is getting at.
Dr. Parikh, am I saying that right?
You are.
Thank you. Do you know anybody who's against biomedical research?
I do not know anybody that's against biomedical research, but I know some.
That's like being against children, isn't it?
It is.
It's like being against world peace, isn't it?
It is.
It's like being against golden retrievers, isn't it?
There's some people that argue there.
Okay. Well, let's get that out of the way. I want to ask you about NIH. I love NIH. I think they do extraordinary work.
Yes, sir.
But isn't it a fact if NIH assigns way too much money for overhead, that money comes out of the basic research? Isn't that the case?
Senator, both those things are providing funds for research. And I agree with you that we need to make the administrative burden and the costs associated with it as low as possible, because we do want as much to go to
Well, why
research.
can't NIH live with 15% overhead?
Yeah. Senator, we have had a partnership that's been going on for 75 years in this country.
Yes, sir, but why can't NIH live with 15% overhead?
At this point, what that would do is actually turn institutions like the ones we've heard about here, it would actually make it to where they are laying off researchers and the support folks who are
Well, the Gates Foundation, when they make grants, they limit overhead to 10%, don't they?
They do, sir, but that is apples to oranges because they count different things.
And the
in
Roberts
overhead.
Woods Johnson Foundation limits overhead to 12%, don't they?
They do. Again, apples to oranges because they count different things.
Isn't it a fact that the universities that receive the most money from NIH also have the biggest endowments?
I haven't checked that, but it probably is true, Senator. And I agree with you. There are challenges that we need to work on.
Well, let's take Harvard. 69 cents out of every dollar from NIH given to Harvard goes to overhead.
No, sir, it's 69 cents out of every dollar 69. It's on top of, it's not within.
Okay.
Which is 1.6.
Let me ask you about one of the worst abuses I've ever seen. It was at Stanford.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Stanford was spending 74% of grants from NIH on overhead. Remember that?
I do, although I was in high school at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't. and they audited Stanford.
Yes, sir.
You remember what they found?
They bought a sailboat.
They found that Stanford was spending some of that money to pay the salaries of the employees at a Stanford-owned shopping center, didn't they?
I don't remember that part.
I do.
But yeah, okay.
They found that Stanford was spending some of that money that was supposed to go to research, ladies and gentlemen, to renovate the president's home,
Yes, sir.
didn't they?
I believe so, Senator. Again.
And to renovate the vice provost's home, too, didn't they?
I believe you when you say that. Yes.
And they also charged, Stanford took NIH research money to help children and applied it to depreciation on a Stanford yacht, didn't they?
Yes, sir. Again, when I was in high school, sir.
Now, does NIH audit every year the way these grants are being spent?
They don't audit every year. There's a process for
So
determining.
they just trust the universities?
No, there's a negotiation that takes place between
Yes,
the
sir,
NIH
but if it's a
and the
five-year grant
university. Yes, sir.
and they agree on indirect costs, they don't audit it every year. What if the universities lie to them?
That is absolutely a possibility.
What does fungible mean?
Fungible means that you can move money from one place to another.
And money's fungible, isn't it?
Money is fungible.
I'm ready to have a productive discussion. I've got to go to another committee. Maybe you'll have it today. I haven't heard it.
Yes, sir.
What I've heard is the implication is that anybody who is against asking hard questions about the overhead and spending is against biomedical research.
I wouldn't say it, sir. I think you are a champion.
And I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I don't either.
But every penny that we spend on overhead that's not being audited, and you know as much as I do, Doc, that some of it is being abused, is money that is taken away from research. And that's just a fact.
Senator,
And if you care about this child here, and I know you do, we all do, then any money spent illegitimately on overhead to pay the salary of a professor in the humanities department at a university is coming out of her research. And it's not wrong to ask questions.
it is not wrong to ask
No,
questions.
it's not.
Not at all. And Senator, I think it's actually important to ask those questions and optimize the system.
And I don't understand why these universities cannot live on 15% overhead when Gates Foundation limits them to 10% and the Johnson Foundation limits them to 12%.
Yes.
I don't understand it. All of a sudden, if they don't get 35% overhead, civilization is going to melt.
It is important.
My
to have
mama
that
didn't raise a fool, and if she did, it was one of my brothers. I'm not buying that.
Senator,
Thank you.
I think it's worth the
The
conversation.
time has expired.
I went way over. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I appreciate your indulgence.
Did you catch that? The Gates Foundation limits overhead to 10%, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation limits it to 12%. So why is it that universities like Harvard and Stanford, which rake in millions and millions of dollars in research grants, can't seem to operate with anything under 30%? 35%? And in some cases, they're spending half of those funds on overhead. How does that even make sense? Folks, I'll tell you why. It's a racket. That's what this is. The very same institutions that claim to be our nation's beacons of higher learning are abusing the system, using your hard-earned tax dollars to prop up their bureaucratic empires instead of supporting the very research that's supposed to be the backbone of progress in this country. And they're doing it with zero accountability. And here's where it gets even worse. Stanford, one of the wealthiest universities in the world, was caught using NIH research funds for things like renovating the president's mansion and, get this, funding a yacht. A yacht. With taxpayer money meant for biomedical research. That's a slap in the face to every American taxpayer who's been forced to foot the bill for these irresponsible, wasteful practices. You want to talk about corruption? That right there is textbook corruption. I don't care who you are, where you come from, or what party you belong to, this is a problem. When these universities get this much money and spend it however they want with no accountability, that's not just waste, it's theft. And the worst part? They're getting away with it. There's no oversight. There's no punishment. The government isn't stepping in, and these universities are laughing all the way to the bank. Did you catch that? NIH doesn't audit these overhead costs every year. So basically, they're just trusting these universities to be honest. And what do we know about trust when it comes to these massive institutions? It's a joke. They can move money around, hide things, and make it look like they're doing the right thing while continuing to waste billions. I'm not some anti-research guy, okay? I want to see progress. I want to see innovation. I want to see breakthroughs in healthcare and science. But we've got to get real here. This system is broken, and it's built to benefit the elites who already have the resources and connections to keep lining their pockets with your tax dollars. They don't care about the American people. They care about their own power and prestige. Let me put this in perspective. Universities like Harvard and Stanford have massive endowments, billion-dollar endowments, yet they continue to rely heavily on federal grants. They could easily operate on much lower overhead costs, but they choose not to. Why? Because they know they can get away with it, and they know the government isn't going to step in and hold them accountable. And that's where we come in. As taxpayers, we have every right to demand accountability. We can't just keep handing out billions of dollars and turning a blind eye to how it's being spent. Senator Kennedy is doing the right thing here by asking the tough questions. Questions that need to be asked, questions that the mainstream media and left-wing elites don't want you to hear. Now, I know some of you are going to say, but we need this money for research, or without this funding we won't make progress. But here's the deal. If you can't run a program efficiently and effectively, then maybe you shouldn't be getting those funds. The Gates Foundation, a private entity, has proven that you can fund projects with minimal overhead, so why can't our top universities do the same? It's time for a change. It's time to demand better accountability, better transparency, and a government that actually works for the people. These universities need to learn that they can't continue to waste our money. We deserve better. America deserves better. That's it for today's video, folks. Make sure you're subscribed, hit that notification bell, and let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree with Senator Kennedy? Is it time to rein in these universities and their outrageous spending? Let's keep the conversation going. As always, God bless America.